Now, the other map I made of these laws focuses on essentially when these laws were passed. And really, the these laws go into pretty much two categories. The first are what I would call archaic laws, or laws which were passed back when essentially the reasoning behind them was some supposed moral standard guiding the entire state. For example, the Puritans in Massachusetts passing such laws in the 1600s. There are a whole bunch of these laws which were written in the 1600s, 1700s, and 1800s, and then never changed. But those aren't the laws I would be worried about when it comes to political ramifications, since people who are presently in power don't really stand to lose much by their abolishment if it is done quietly and if it is done with respect to the animal. No. Instead, what I would be worried about are the dark orange and red states, which are states where laws have been passed recently, in the past 50 years or so. In particular, the red states where laws against bestiality have been passed within the past, decade and a half. These states, it's going to be very difficult to get anything done when it comes to legalizing bestiality because there's too much political pressure to keep it illegal. And let me go through two of the states where I know the stories very well, because basically I've looked into the matters and have figured out why these laws were passed in those particular states. In Washington state, the reason why this law was passed in 2006 was that there was a case of a man by the name of Kenneth Pinion, I think. You may know him as Mr. Hands. Basically, this is a man who was penetrated by a stallion and then essentially ruptured his colon, causing him to bleed out and die, which led to a massive uproar about the circumstances of his death. And that uproar led to political pressure, which led to the law against bestiality, which in my opinion doesn't really make any sense, considering that the animal itself wasn't harmed at all. So that all of the risk was going to the human being who was having sex with the stallion, and thus there's no real reason for legislation to get passed about it at all. If there was some overwhelming interest in public safety for it, okay, but I think that a state in which certain kinds of euthanasia are legal. Is that Washington state? It's either Washington or Oregon. Anyway, a state which is liberal in so many other regards should not consider this to be just so taboo that they simply cannot allow it to happen, just because they're offended at one extreme case. Now, the other case I know of is Arizona, and the reason I know about this is that I used to live there for a time. You see, there was a time prior to, let's say after 1970, when bestiality was in fact legal in Arizona. It was perfectly fine for a human being and an animal to get to it and not bother anybody else. That happened until the fire chief of one of the towns of Maricopa County, I think it was, got caught having sex with a sheep. He got caught, but they couldn't do anything about it legally because he hadn't done anything illegal. And this got the sheriff of Maricopa County, Joe Arpaio, roiling mad. He got so upset by this that he went on this crusade to make sure that zoosexuality was banned in this state because he felt that it was wrong for this to happen. And what did he do to convince the legislature of this? He went and found the worst case, the absolute worst case, a case where a toy poodle had been kidnapped from its home and raped and would never physically or psychologically recover. He took that and presented it as a typical case. Now, those who are familiar with Joe Arpaio's tactics in the past on the drug war and on immigration and on the birther controversy should know that he is a political addict. He just can't get enough attention for being, quote, the toughest sheriff in the U.S. So that's what's happening in those two states. So watch out in those states. In other states where it's legal, there were laws against it naturally because, well, moral outrage at the very thought of it was constant in the culture. But as I said, well, I may not have said it, there are 18 states where zoophilia is technically legal. Again, no need to really shout about that fact, but it's good to know that there are at least some places where we can go and not worry about just being prosecuted because of sex with animals. In 10 of these states, well, actually, in 13 of these states, these laws were repealed in the 70s and 80s. And they were repealed by the legislatures of those states. And really, if the people of a state deem it correct to repeal such archaic laws, I'm in favor of that. I'm obviously not in favor of those same people saying that there needs to be some sort of extra protection for animals simply because they are not humans and are thereby inferior. The more recent cases of repeal for these laws are more interesting to me because in addition to 3 of them being legislatively repealed, including Montana, 2 of them were also invalidated by state Supreme Court decisions, and the most recent one, the law which was struck down in Virginia in March of this year, was struck down by a U.S. Circuit Court. Which goes to show that these laws, particularly laws of the kind that are crime against nature laws, can be fought against. And even if we have to wait for byproducts of more popular stances on sexuality, it's still a good sight better than what we would have been doing before, which is anyone who is not doing the normal thing is automatically wrong and needs to be punished for it. So that's it for the laws against bestiality. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you later. This is Arlo Kilpatrick signing off.